Welcome back. What a great conversation with Jen. What a great presentation. Some terrific learnings. Love the be human, love the be bold, and love that it really worked out for them in the end. I'm now going to introduce Grace Mace, who will present to bring us the executive panel. So thank you so much, Grace, and excited to hear what they all have to say.
Thank you, Ethan. Well, as we heard from Jen Robinson earlier, our keynote speaker, managing through crisis is never easy. COVID-19 is a reality we never imagined, and it has devastated lives and profoundly impacted many businesses. With COVID in the backdrop, this year truly challenged the status quo. Simple things like how we collaborate with our team members, managing our roadmap. In fact, 38% of you guys talked about rewriting your roadmap, meeting our quarterly OKRs, even balancing our life and personal life and work life while we're homebound. Perhaps some of you with little ones at home trying to help them to sit through Zoom classrooms. As a leader of a team or an organization, it is important to know how to assess the situation and manage your team through uncertain times. How you choose to respond and lead your team through crisis will set the tone for the future. And now, with our executive panelists, they'll share with us how they are leading their teams through these uncertain times. And we're extremely excited to have these four incredible industry trailblazers. I had the privilege to work with them in different capacities and witness in firsthand how they lead their teams through turbulent times, going from surviving to thriving. First, we have Yuchen Chen. He is the president of Topgolf Media. Jaleesa Clark, vice president of product management and business intelligence at Bright Horizons. Jennifer Dolsky, CEO and founder of Rising Team. And Doug Leeds, CEO of Eat Club. Panelists, would you please share with us a little bit about yourselves? Start with you, Chen.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I've done a bunch of startups. I was lucky enough to start a company called World Golf Tour, which was the first free-to-play golf app out there, and sold that business to Topgolf. And ever since, working with technology and leading teams into how do you think about things differently? How do you reinvent things? The last thing I've been working on the last 20 years is how do you democratize golf and make it accessible to everybody? And Topgolf is a really great way to do that. And, it's something that it really is at my core, is figuring out how you can bring people together, and no matter what, gender or political or religious ways, how can we break bread together? And that's sort of what guides me in figuring out what products and what companies I want to work at.
Great. Jaleesa?
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. My name is Jaleesa Clark, and I run product management and business intelligence at a company called Bright Horizons. If you're not familiar, it is a company most known for childcare, but it's generally employer-sponsored benefits. So the daycare that's in Google or at Facebook or at Goldman Sachs, all of those things. But we also offer college coaching and elder care, emergency childcare. But my career has actually spanned a lot of industries, started in financial services. I worked at Bain doing management consulting, worked at big tech companies like Yahoo, where I worked with Grace. Or actually, well, we didn't, yeah, anyway, we worked together, but And I've also worked at startups as well, most recently at an ed tech startup. And I've had a number of roles, including product, so general management, marketing, product marketing. And so I really come at this from a cross-functional perspective, one of collaboration. I also worked at an innovation and design firm, so design thinking and really getting into the humanity of the needs of people, like thinking of your customers as human beings is really, really important to me. And then lastly, outside of work, I teach mindfulness meditation, breath work, and sound healing. So
great. Jennifer?
Yes, hi, I'm Jennifer Dolsky. I have held a lot of roles in a 20+ year career in tech. I've served executive product leadership, general management roles at Facebook, Google, and Yahoo. And I've done 3 startups and helped scale change.org from small to hundreds of millions of users around the world. Right now, so earlier this year, I started a new company called Rising Team. We are all about how do you transform managers to become all-star coaches for their teams that maximize then the success of their teams and organizations. And I looked back on my whole career, and the thing I've loved most across all the jobs is just about how do you build teams that are happy and successful. And so now we're building that into a product for everyone to do. And it turns out to be even more important in a world where people are trying to lead their teams remotely, which is just so challenging. And this year, I also started a new role as a lecturer at the Graduate School for Business at Stanford. So I'm teaching management as well as building a company about managing teams. So,
Hats off to you. Doug? You're on mute. Oh, there you
Sure
go.
am. Okay. It's really great to hear from the other panelists, because there's so much in common, actually. Not just that some of us work together, Grace and I, and I think Jennifer and I worked together back at Yahoo. It's been a while, but nice to see you. Yeah, so I've been at big companies and small. When I was at Yahoo, I was in the legal department. And I left law to run product at Ask. Ended up taking over that business and then buying a bunch more while at IAC. One of the things I did while I was at IAC was bring in a company called eClub to provide food for us, and was struck by, just as Shane said about how to break bread together, like bringing people together at work while they were eating was the most powerful thing I had seen in changing a culture. And it got me really excited. So I ended up joining eClub as CEO. And I've been there for 2 years, including the last 7 months, where we went from $85 million in revenue to zero overnight. That's been an incredible, I mean, our mission was to bring people together to eat at work. That's not really what people want to do right now. But I was able to pivot the company, and as of Saturday, we sold it. Really exciting, fun times, and I'm learning again what it's like to be at a big company over the last 3 days. So thrilled to be here, and I think this will be a great conversation, so thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Doug. Well, due to the global pandemic, there's significant shift in consumer needs and business needs. In fact, 84% of you guys mentioned that in the earlier poll questions. And this results in some companies hurting while others are pursuing new business opportunities. Of course, there are many businesses in between. And for the panelists, what were you 7 months ago and where are you now in relation to the spectrum of severely impact to new opportunities? Doug?
Sure. Where are we now? Well, severely impacted for sure. I sort of just gave you the sense of that. We brought food into offices when people stopped coming to offices, and they stopped ordering our food. And so really overnight, literally overnight, we went from $85 million to zero. But it was a wonderful challenge. It was something where it taxed every single person at the company. We were 850 people. The company we just sold was 22 people. So quite a difference. We went from making food and delivering food every day to pure SaaS and just a technology company. But I also think that in some ways that would have been our future anyway, that we were really challenged with growth and with scale because of our need to make food and deliver food and the challenges in scaling that up. When we became a technology company, boom, as you all know, we can make scale happen really quickly and are doing that now. So, but gosh, seeing people change from like, we're running a big company to now we're running a small company, not understanding what your OKRs are because they're not relevant anymore, and changing them, and what your outlook is and who your customer is. That's all changed for us. So it's been quite the last 7 months where I think every single thing about the business has changed, and could really see a difference in people. Some embraced that change, some didn't embrace that change. I'm just rambling. So I think I've left whatever you asked me as a question, and I've gone off onto something else. Apologize.
Oh, that's good. What about you, Jen?
Well, first I want to say like it's amazing to hear Doug having been through that and sort of the maintaining some amount of optimism and understanding what you learned through what I'm sure was a really difficult period. It's inspiring to hear that. Yeah, so I am on the opposite side of the spectrum because we only started this company really at the very end of March. So I have started building an entire company. We have never ever had a single in-person meeting with anyone on my team. There's, I'm sure this is true for many people where they have new people starting that you've never met in person, but it definitely has shown me so much of what is possible when you bring people together, even not physically, of what you can what we can still create and how we can still build exciting new businesses no matter how difficult our circumstances get. So that's been really great. And then I also joined 2 boards at the beginning of this year, just thinking about what mattered to me. And I picked a couple of boards that were in categories that I care about. And both of those businesses have seen really big impacts too. One of the boards is Weight Watchers, and they've been a physical studio business and had to shut down every studio and go all digital. And I agree with what Doug said here. It's like, while it's been difficult, it's also been this tremendous opportunity to really accelerate things that were likely to happen anyway. But all of a sudden, all your focus could go on that thing that you knew was really important, but you probably weren't prioritizing as much as you should have. And so I think it's going to be ultimately really very good for their business. And the other board is a climate, it's a nonprofit climate board. And there's things people are trying to do out in the physical world where you no longer can get there. So it's just been really interesting to see how different organizations adapt to the pandemic.
Jaleesa, thank you.
Yeah, so I work at a public company, and that's in childcare for the most part, which is interesting during a pandemic environment. And so the good news is that we are diversified in terms of having different services. So what ended up happening for us is, while one of our businesses, the one I talked about, which is childcare, full-time childcare at your company, those, we had to close. We furloughed like 18,000 people. It was very upsetting for many. Imagine all of the teachers all over the country. But that said, I specialize and focus a lot of my time on our backup care business, so our emergency childcare. So in the rare cases that school is out or your nanny is sick. So while one business completely tanked, another business just like grew. Like, we couldn't handle the volumes. We signed up so many more clients. It was really, really crazy. And the other thing is that we were serving frontline workers. So hospitals, doctors, nurses, all of them had to get to work. So it was a very stressful period where we were working all the time, just trying to meet those needs. And it was very, very meaningful because we were trying to keep people healthy. So I'd say that what ended up happening for us at Bright Horizons was a reprioritization and really putting a lot of effort in one of our businesses while having to put pause on another. And that said, even in our current business, having to adjust to different customer needs. So for example, think childcare, we have these centers where you drop your kid off, and we have in-home or like nannies coming to your house. As you might imagine, nobody wants to drop their kid off at a center anymore, and most of ours were closed. So having to reshuffle our supply and figure that out based on needs, as well as safety precautions, right? So we're still delivering care, but things like COVID testing, who have you seen? Like, all of these questions, did you wash your hands? Like, all of these things that we didn't have to think about before so much were really top of mind. And I'd say that communicating that we care, that we're paying attention, and almost over communicating that we're paying attention to customer needs was really, really critical.
Yeah, I think you shared with me earlier about your wait time for the customer support. What was it like the first few weeks?
Oh my goodness. Well, our website broke because we couldn't handle the volumes. So this is what happens when you leave Silicon Valley and work for a company that's not in Silicon Valley. And so the technology and the architecture is just very different, things that I used to take for granted. And so, yeah, our website was did not work because it couldn't handle the volumes. And we had wait times of about 3 days at our call center. And so, what do you do then? We're like, we actually put on the website, please don't call us when it started working, right? So yeah, it was very dramatic and exciting.
Thank you. Yi-Chen?
Yeah, I just resonate with so many of the stories you guys are all talking about. You know, yeah, I lead a team of about 22,000 people. So when the pandemic hit, it's a very diversified business. Our chairman and board, they decided that they want to diversify from just being, a location-based entertainment company. So that's the core of where Topgolf started. It's like this really entertaining driving range that you can eat and food and have a good time. But with the acquisition of my company that I started, they decided to diversify into digital stuff roughly about 4 years ago. So we really experienced the two halves where the venue business went to zero, and we actually closed really early. We decided that, hey, this is pretty serious and we don't want to be part of spreading the problem. So we shut down pretty early. And it was a really hard decision because that meant we knew we had to either lay off or furlough, roughly 20,000 people. And we had to go really back to our core values about how you treat people compassionately, how we communicate with them transparently. A lot of the people who work, especially in our hospitality business, it's their first job they've ever had. A lot of them were hourly, and so to help them through that was very difficult because it's the first time you lose your job, it's really tough. By the fifth time, you got a hang of it, right? It's not you just kind of roll with it. At the same time we were dealing with that and making sure that we could provide benefits because people were going to get sick. We wanted to keep them on benefits, even though, we were furloughing them or whatever. And then the other side of the business is all the digital portfolio that we have. We have an esports golf game. We have, content. We actually facilitate a lot of driving ranges to have content to play games at driving ranges outside of Topgolf. All of those things boomed during the pandemic and still continue to increase dramatically. So in the virtual golf game, we saw up to 70% increase in traffic and it continues to this day. And so it was both sides. So I had one team that was really mourning and really sad. And I had another team that was just like taking it from the fire hose. And even though we do have Silicon Valley engineers, like our ticket log got, up to 3 days too. It's just like, you can't take that surge of traffic that quickly. But we kept going back to our core values of being compassionate, being caring, being very transparent with what was going on. And, fortunately for us, the venues are all open now. Our walk-in traffic is actually higher than it was pre-pandemic. And our people team did a fantastic job because we basically hired back everybody. So within like 6 months, we went through a process of paring down and then back to rehiring, and it's just been completely nuts. So
Wow. Well, actually, that leads to my next question. It's a two-part. What's your company's mission and what are your core values, and how do they help you to manage your team through these uncertain times?
I guess I can continue since I started. So yeah, our main core values are about carrying one team, fun and being edgy. And edgy, we think of it as like doing the thing that's unexpected, that's hard, to have the courage to do things. And so, those are how we treat each other and we operate. And, we just default to that. And what you learn is, and fortunately we have really great leaders, is that you rely on their personal relationships in this remote world. And you can get a lot more done that way. And we were able to pivot and change quickly because everyone trusted us. And they just, we were very open. We just said, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We just know we need to change. So let's change together, and we'll let you know how it goes. And if it doesn't work out, we'll still treat you fairly and humanely and help you land as much as possible. And the good news is we were able to fulfill that and bring a lot of people back. And our mission and why we exist is that's actually a really good story because we had to go discover that. We were like, why is Topgolf even working? This seems like kind of crazy. I don't understand why it's so popular. But what we discovered in sort of our forensics analysis is that we're just really a tool to bring people together. You know, through play, you can celebrate together and break bread. And that, you know, regardless of what your religion, politics, gender, or whatever, you know, when you focus on something that's fun, you can build bridges. And so that is our mission. Our mission is to bring people together in meaningful ways. And we do that either through our venue, our digital assets, or any product that we spin up. And it's proven to be very successful formula. It's not unique, but we seem to be able to execute it pretty well.
Great. Jaleesa?
Yeah, you know, I love what Yu Chang said about just how relationships can really make people more productive working together. At Bright Horizons, we have, our values are called the HEART principles, which, you know, is just so soft, warm and fuzzy, but it's honesty, excellence, you know, it has to be an acronym, right? Honesty, excellence, accountability, respect, and teamwork. And people constantly refer to the HEART principles. And when people give feedback, the feedback is given in the context of the HEART principles. I really didn't think that that behavior, that specific thing that you did, represented the HEART principles. And as you might imagine, during stressful times, some of those get thrown out the window, unfortunately. So, you know, I'm not going to tell you that during this time, it was all roses. In fact, I'd say of those, the respect piece so there was teamwork. We were all working together like we had to, but the respect piece I found to be very challenging, particularly when our senior leaders were under a lot of stress. So you could imagine if you have our clients, like the you know, it's all HR as our clients. So the CHRO of insert like any Fortune 100 company, the banks, the hospitals, and they're yelling and they are angry. And so, and then we have the street kind of coming at us like, what are your numbers look like? And so in stressful situations, there were, you know, examples when folks did not treat others with respect and they needed to be reminded. And those reminders can come from all levels, right? And so I'd say that, you know, that was challenging when stress comes, but on the other side of it, there was a lot of really like coming together as a team. You know, I lived in New York for a while, and anytime some crazy thing happened in New York, you know, from 9/11 to the blackout, there's no electricity. And somehow in times of stress and hardship, people really come together and come through. So what we found was a lot of thank yous, a lot of appreciation, but also encouraging people to take time for self-care when possible. So like the folks that like we knew hadn't slept in 2 weeks, we were like, maybe you should take a day off. Like we think there could be a day, like please think about it. And we also did a lot of things around team building and like, you know, to Yu Chang's point about fun and bringing people together, both at Topgolf, but in the workplace, you can't have happy hours anymore, right? So we did the virtual games that a lot of people were doing for a period. We did virtual happy hours. And I also think that this Zoom concept of actually seeing people's homes or like their kids starting to crawl on top of them during a meeting, you know, somebody's cat the other day was like all up on the keyboard. And those things really help you to get to know somebody on a more personal level. So I'd say while there was stress and there were some moments, as a whole, we really came together. And I think the HEART principles were really core to that. And then in terms of our mission is to provide innovative programs that help children, families, and employers work together to be their best, right? So that's like the combination of all of the services that I mentioned. And we really did have to partner with our clients to be innovative to meet the changing needs. So I'll give you an example is creating pop-up childcare centers at hospitals with all the precautions and the social distancing and the masks, et cetera. Or even, you know, the needs today are, I'm working from home, my kid is right here, and the kid has virtual school. So is there a way to help them with their schoolwork while I can still work? So we actually had to come up with new products and services as a result of this. And it'll be very interesting to see which pieces stick and which are just for now.
Thank you. I love that HEART as a mission.
Yeah, I'm laughing at the reality that we all are in each other's lives. It's so funny that, you know, my kids are both in college, so they are although they're in virtual college, but they're living somewhere else. But I still have a dog at home. And, now in California, it's so smoky. Like normally I could leave the door open and the dog can go in and out, but now I can't even leave my door open. So I have to get up all the time. And yeah, we're all seeing each other's realities. So at Rising Team, our mission, as I think I said earlier, is to transform managers into all-star coaches that maximize the success of their teams and organizations. And the reason we do that, so we think about a vision statement too, like what would the world look like if we're successful? And our vision is actually a world where every person in the workforce is deeply understood, supported, and empowered to reach their goals. And so that feels like a really important mission, and especially right now. So I think for our team, it's been maybe a little bit easier because it's just so motivating to do this kind of work. And essentially because we're in the act of creating the company, we are what we're building. We get to like live this every day. And one of the premises behind Rising Team is that great managers are like great sports coaches. And so we have this sort of 3 C's are our core pillars that you should coach, deeply understand each team member and help them grow. Clarify, which is lay out a clear plan for the future and articulate who does what, and then connect. So how do you make it feel like a team and a cohesive unit? And so the values, which we've actually just recently articulated, are all around this kind of sports theme. So it kind of brings the whole thing home. And, we're all one team. We cheer each other on. We persist over the hurdles in our way. We sweat the results. Everything has that kind of sports metaphor so that people can kind of live and breathe the idea of being a great coach in their lives. And it's been, I will say it's easier. There's some hard things about having a startup because those are really scrappy days that most people remember. But it's also in some ways easier to be starting it now because you know what your reality is. So we're not having to scramble to change things at the last minute. We can build into this, and the mission's been really helpful.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you. Doug?
So our mission was, I think I said, to bring people together to eat at work. On March 17th, all of a sudden that didn't make sense anymore. No one wanted to go to work. Certainly, if they did have to go to work, they didn't want to be around other people. Certainly didn't want to be around other people who were eating without a face mask on. So it all kind of got blown up, what our mission was on March 17th. And I think if I had to articulate our mission has been for the past 6 months, it's survive. Like that's been our mission is just to figure out how to survive, which isn't the best mission. It doesn't really help. In fact, we're kind of feeling the pinch of that right now because we've now survived, and now we're like, what do we do now? But our values, which we only right before this happened sort of put on paper for the first time, I think really did carry us through this last 7 months. Those values being push yourself and support other people who are pushing themselves. No secrets, no spin, no BS. Which is sort of like transparency. And if any of these mattered, it was that one during this past time. And then be relentlessly curious and question the status quo. Those are our values. And we really did top to bottom live that and reference them and came back to that through this whole time, especially the no secrets, no spin, no BS. As I said, we got acquired, deal closed Saturday. We were technically out of money on Friday. And everyone at the company knew that. And that's what it took. Like, it was amazing. We went from 850 people down to 22, but only 2 people quit this whole time. And they did it in the last week, unfortunately, because we just didn't know if it was going to close or not, and they had to take another job. But throughout the whole time, giving people the ability to make decisions themselves, to give themselves some control, which is what we all were feeling we lacked during this period of time, I think was the key for us holding ourselves together and getting the sale done, is that people understood that they had enough information to be able to figure out what they wanted to do. And luckily what they wanted to do was stay. And then also then from the business perspective of figuring out what it means to be a business where your mission just got blown up and how do you put yourself together in a new way. But we wouldn't have done it without our values and without people really living those values, even if our mission was completely blown up.
Wow. Thank you, Doug.
Mhm.
Now, in the past 7 months, how do your team respond when emotions are heightened? I mean, Doug, given what you guys just went through, a massive roller coaster, when did you start?
I think, again, it goes back to that just be transparent thing, which was, look, everyone knew that we, I don't know what the technical term was, we were fucked. I mean, excuse me, but that was the technical term. And everyone knew it. And like, I've gone through, we all have through business cycles, up, down, adding people really fast, subtracting people. And this, I've never scaled down faster or more significant when we did, but I've also never felt more support from the people who we let go. Like, it was absolutely stunning. We tried to do it in the right way and humane, but they all knew what was coming and where they fit in and why. And that was what was a key to ultimately getting to a good place, which was treating people with respect for them and for the people who stayed, so that they could see that they could trust what was happening. They could trust the system. I think Yu-Cheng, you said it, but someone said it for sure about trust being the most important. Trust is the most important thing. Everything is either built well on trust or built poorly on the lack of trust. So that's our story. It was radical transparency, letting everyone know exactly what position we were in, how many pennies were left. When we decided to go after a different customer, the how and the why of that, and what was going to be required, and who was likely not to make it to the end, and what we were doing for them. That was the way we brought this to a ultimately successful conclusion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
A lot of tears were shed, I gotta tell you that, through this whole process. And just to echo you, Doug, like some of the conversations I had, one of them, the associate that we were letting go basically said, hey, if this helps the company survive, and if it means that another person can keep their job, I'm really happy to do it. Thank you for being open with me. And we were just like, oh my gosh, like, and the number of times we had to let go of somebody and then they actually thanked us was like crazy. I was like, no, like, I should be sorry and thankful for you for understanding. But yeah, it's this time it's really exposed, like, the people, right? It's like, who are the good people? Who are the people who are caring? And it also exposed the other side. But for us, what got us through, and we're by no means near the end, but we are surviving, and we're trying to be positive, is not only transparency, which I totally agree with, but also we have this phrase that we use a lot, which is called charitable assumption. So we just always try to apply that as much as possible. So if you get a little terse email from somebody, just be charitable. Assume that they had a bad day, or maybe they had to clean up throw up from their kid right before the Zoom call, or whatever it is. Everyone's going through their own battles, and a little charity on your part goes a long way. And I feel like that's really been helpful for everybody. Just assume the best.
Yeah, this is an interesting time, because I'm sure we've all been through many crises in our career. I have definitely seen many. This is one in which, as a leader, it's pretty clear that it's out of our control. Most crises we will face, even though this is probably harder from a drama perspective in terms of the absolute effects on people, I think in some ways it's easier, because most crises have to do actually more with decisions that were or weren't made by leadership and other things. And so there's sort of some implication on you and how you manage any crisis that's being faced and your own role and responsibility in it. Whereas in this one, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, we're doing our best to manage through it, but the pandemic is not any one leader's fault. And so I think that's maybe part of why there's a little bit more sensitivity to some of these really hard calls that people are having to make. I think one of the things that I've learned over the time of managing many crises, I did spend the last couple years at Facebook, and before that, just many ups and downs, is that I have come to learn that there are different types of crisis responders on our teams. I compare it kind of like actually real crisis responders in natural disasters, which, let's give them all the credit they deserve. It's much harder than, the life and death crises are much harder than the ones we face in the workplace, but the patterns are the same. And so I try to keep an eye out for, there's basically 4 types, I think. There's firefighters. They're people who, they see the problem, they're running in, they're trying to fix it. Everything's about, how do I get this fire out? There are fire inspectors, who are the people who want to understand why the fire was caught in the first place, and how do we put the systems and processes in place so that we don't catch things on fire again. There are EMTs on our team, who are the people who care about the people, and they want to make sure when the crisis is happening that people have snacks, and there are, counselors nearby to listen, and we have town halls and all of this. And then there are also the 4th type, is what I call the doomsayer. These are people who, when, your house catches on fire and they say, oh no, the whole block's going to catch on fire, and then the whole neighborhood, and they sort of cause extra panic. And so, I think it really helps as a, just to figure out what kind of responder we each are, and also try to have a blend on our teams, because I've definitely been in places where I had too many firefighters and no fire inspectors. And I've also been on teams where I had way too many fire inspectors and no one to put the fire out. So it's really important to have that sense of how we're each going to come to a crisis and how we can help our teams navigate them too.
I love the 4 types of responders. I wrote that down. That is amazing. Particularly because I usually just think about firefighters. And honestly, for my team and my entire organization, we generally were filled with firefighters. In a company that has HEART principles, there weren't that many doomsday people. And you'd think there would be EMTs, people caring and trying to take it, but no, it was all straight firefighting. And so then in the context of firefighting and a ton of firefighters, I felt the need, especially, I do a lot of mindfulness work, right? I felt the need to be the EMT, and so making sure everybody was okay. And so I guess I'll say, yeah, everybody's emotions were super heightened, high stress. Obviously there were the folks that were furloughed, and that was very, very sad. All of us that were still there with way more volume. I think we did 3 years of volume in 6 weeks or something. It was crazy. And so in a context like that, it was very important to take time to ask people how they were doing. Okay, and I say that slowly because you start a meeting, you're like, how's everybody doing? Good. Okay, let's keep going. Agenda item number 1. And no, I felt that during this time, it was very important to say, how are you? And pause and let people have that space to actually say how they were doing. And, a lot of people were gung-ho about it and great. And they're like, I'm on it, right? Because there was this, I think it's also important when it's stressful situations, to people understand the why, what's driving them. Why am I working so hard? Why am I doing this? And during this period, as I mentioned, we were helping out a lot of frontline workers, particularly in the healthcare industry. And so it was very clear, I am suffering right now, because it was a lot of suffering. I am suffering right now so that doctors can go to work so that they can save lives. And that is was just really, really powerful. And then the, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? I had somebody on my team, his dad got COVID during this period. In fact, in the last 6 months, his dad got COVID, got well from COVID, and then had cancer and had to have brain surgery. Right. And so talking about being just really flexible, asking, because I wouldn't have known if I hadn't asked, right? But then also giving the flexibility, regardless of what's happening, to be you know what, we got your back. If you can't be here, we'll get somebody else to do it.
Wow. I love all of what you guys said. This is so important. And I think about then that transition to my next question of what mindfulness practices do you recommend to improve yours and also your team's emotional wellness and mental health?
I might start just. You know, I have been exploring a lot of different tools that folks can use in the workplace that aren't complicated. That doesn't mean that you are like, you know, levitating, meditating, right? You know, something very, very simple that folks can do in the moment of just a very stressful situation are what I call, a lot of people call just belly breaths. So it's a deep breath, but the difference is if you put your hand on your belly and feel it expand all the way to the limit, and you just do that 3 times, you'd be surprised what can happen because it really impacts your parasympathetic nervous system. So your sympathetic nervous system, that's fight or flight, right? You're stressed out and you're like, you know, it's like survival mode, right? And so the parasympathetic nervous system is about rest, it's about calming, it's about rejuvenation. And something as simple as 3 deep belly breaths in any situation will just like reset you. So that belly breaths. I'd say another thing that's really important, I guess this counters like the doomsday folks in Jennifer's list, is a gratitude list. So something as simple as writing down 3 things that you're grateful for every day. I advise doing it in the morning, like when you first get up, or right before you go to bed. But something actually happens in your brain chemistry when you focus on those things. So it's like, it's very, very impactful. And then the last thing I'll say is that, you know, I think we're all really, really busy people. It's funny, during COVID, during this whole period, I have been busier than I've ever been in my life. I don't understand. Everybody was like, what am I going to do with all my free time? I'm going to read a book. I'm like, what book? Like, I'm running around like a crazy person. What are you talking about? And so I also suggest to folks to actually put time on your calendar for self-care, whatever that means for you. That might mean going for a run. That might mean taking a bath. That might mean leaving your house and going for a walk. But whatever it is, put it on your calendar and don't let yourself override it. Because I also do that. I'm just like, oh no, that's not important, but it is important. So those are my thoughts.
I'll add just one thing here because those are great thoughts. I love those ideas, especially the gratitude list. For me, I think the walk and talk has been the most helpful, and so it is like, you know, getting out of your house. The Zoom fatigue is so real, and I realize not everyone can do this because some people have young kids at home that you can't, you know, no one else to help. But if you can, you know, I have tried to schedule and encourage my team to schedule at least 1 or 2 calls a day that are on the phone. And so I will just walk around the neighborhood, talk on the phone. And it's funny because walking meetings were also a trend in the workplace. And I've worked a couple of places where like the walking meeting is always a thing. And I never liked them before because I'm only 5 feet tall. And so I was always like running to keep up with whoever I was in the walking meeting with. And so this is like the perfect version because I can walk at my own pace, but I'm still getting some work done. I'm seeing the outside, breathing the fresh air. And I think it also takes a little pressure off the team to have to always be on video. It's also been good. Sometimes I just call an old friend instead of doing a work call.
I know that the poll just went out and I saw that exercise won and I clicked on it, but I am definitely wearing the COVID-15 here, like without a doubt, and could be doing way more than I have been. But what we did collectively, I think, helped at the company, which we recognized that there were just fewer opportunities to interact with each other outside of work. I think, you know, we transitioned to working through Zoom or whatever relatively okay, so much so that we're not going back to an office even when we can. But we missed just enjoying each other outside of work in some way. So we started putting together these little sessions, and we tried to do it on Fridays, but then Fridays were too hard. So we just sort of do it randomly through the week where someone presents something that they know something about that doesn't have anything to do with work, kind of tying into our value of being curious. But, you know, we've had it on cooking. Sometimes it does have to do with work. We had someone talk about like how to become a software developer. That has something to do with work, but it was at a level where people who weren't software developers could interact with it. The idea was just take something you know something about, someone did something on butterflies, and present it to the rest of us so we could interact with it and think about something new, and also get a little bit more close to our colleagues in a way we couldn't do before. I think that seems to have sort of helped us all through this period.
Yeah, the only nuggets I have is, we tried to institute all those things that you talked about, but what really helped was when our leaders actually demonstrated that they actually did that stuff. So, they actually went in calendars and blocked out lunch, blocked out an afternoon walk. And so in our system, you can see like everyone's calendar. So it's like, oh, like all the leaders have lunch blocked off. I guess I can do it. And all the leaders started asking for walking meetings, and they would actually hold their phone and walk and Zoom at the same time, which we find like is totally acceptable. And exercising and stuff like that. And actually, like, they started doing like group exercises, and we had like a giant yoga class which we had like 300 employees on. That was pretty crazy, actually. But so yeah, I think it's actually just actually doing it, leadership through action. And then the second thing that's helped us a lot is we reorganized a lot of our functions. So like, we found that people who are like in finance or HR or like IT, or these departments that service a lot of groups, that they were suffering from the most amount of loneliness and depression, and like, am I worthy, and all these questions came up. And what we did is we started assigning people to project groups. So if there's a group working on a special project, we go, okay, this is your accounting person. And they felt like they're part of a team and they're a part of a project. And, we do stand-ups all the time to show progress. So yeah, to stand up, you're like, here's the new feature in the app, or here's the new thing we're rolling out at the venue. And then right next to them is like HR and finance, and they feel, they're part of that, and they are part of it. They facilitated it. They made sure that everything worked. And so what we did is we found that helped a lot. That helped the sense of belonging. And now we just kind of like rotate people through different, project teams. And even if it traditionally didn't make sense that they'd be in project team, well, they are now. So, and it's helped morale a lot.
Great. Well, I love all of you guys really focus on the people. I mean, end of the day, everyone wants to be seen, heard, and valued, and know that they matter. And so all the example you share with us and how you lead is incredibly valuable. So we're going to take a couple minutes to take questions from our audience. The first one is, how did you find open board opportunities to join?
I think that might be to me, because I mentioned joining two boards early in the conversation. I think it really varies. For me, some of those opportunities came through recruiters. Others came just from, opportunistic. For instance, the climate board I joined, I found through someone I met on a bus on the way to volunteer at a prison in the Valley in California. And we were talking about climate. Like, you just never know. It's all about just making connections here and there. And then I think if there are, especially for nonprofit boards that you're really interested in, I think, reaching out and starting to volunteer and so forth can really help. For corporate boards, I think it's generally more about building relationships with recruiters and investors that generally place board members.
Good. Well, while we're waiting for additional questions, how do you, let me ask you a vision this, how can product team prepare for the post-pandemic world as they're rewriting their roadmap and so forth?
I can just tell you what we've done, and maybe that's helpful. So, I think there's a ton of data out there that if you go through the consumer hierarchy of needs and desires, that safety is probably number one. And so, products and services, any way that you can facilitate, people either going back to work or resuming their regular lives in a safe way. And if you can put yourself at the nexus of that, it's going to be really, really beneficial. And secondarily, we're lucky, and of course we say this, but it's about connecting people. So if you can find a way where people can be heard, they can be can share, they can break bread together. A lot of those services are skyrocketing right now, and you know, I don't know. I Peloton now more than I've ever had, and you know, I think a lot of people are because it's like it's kind of social, but you know, I feel safe and it sort of checks all the boxes. So you know, if you can check a couple boxes we've already talked about today, like that's where we're adjusting all our product stuff, and we're doubling down and investing in, you know, safety, connecting, control, like what Doug talked about earlier. Like everyone wants control, so give them the control, you know, put everything in the app so they don't have to ask somebody for something, you know, like those are the main themes that we're working with, is give people safety, give people a way to connect, and give a way to where they can help control their lives better.
Great. One question just came in. Do you have any advices for hunting for a new PM job position in this time, or for a remote re-interview?
Call me. That would be the first one, because I'm looking to hire some product managers. So my first advice is to do that. I don't, you know, I was going to answer the other question, and I think it's a similar answer here, which is one of the things I was struck by was with all this change that was going on, our mission change, our customer change, our business change, the fundamentals of product management didn't change at all. Like it was absolutely critical that we had the exact same process of understanding our customer needs, understanding what our capabilities were, bridging those two things, seeing where the market opportunity, all the things that product managers do, exactly the same, just in a new world. But the way you're a product manager and the way product functions and the importance of it in the organization, that didn't change at all. If anything, it got more important. So the two people I said that we lost during COVID were both product managers. And I think the reason why that is because everyone, I don't know, I can't say everyone, but I think the importance of product management is more obvious than ever right now in the world. And so where we saw people struggling or worried about finding opportunities, and I'm speaking in the Bay Area, but I don't think it matters anymore. I mean, if anything, people aren't looking to hire someone to come into an office, certainly not in the short term. So, you know, product management is just as important as ever. And I think the way you go about, and I'll defer to other folks, but I think the way you go about finding those jobs is the same way you always have, which is working your networks, talking to people, being curious, putting yourself in position to understand what's happening. And then, because I know that this is also what used to work for us, is just call people whose businesses you're interested in. That's a really powerful way of finding opportunities, and you've got nothing to lose. Yes, the hit rate is probably going to be lower than if someone's calling you about a job, but you're more likely to like what you do when you get there because you were the one who reached out. So a lot of things are changing. I don't think these things are changing that much, in my opinion.
Got it. And one last question. What kind of, for Cindy, what type of behavior do you expect individual product managers to be modeled during a crisis?
I mean, I think there are 4 key behaviors that product managers exhibit, period. As you know, Doug said, those things don't tend to change that much. And you might add a 5th, which is adaptability, which is extra high in the crisis. But to me, the 4 key things are customer empathy. You know, you really do have to understand who you're serving, what they need, what their feelings are, and that might be heightened and different in a crisis. The second one I call creativity, like it's not in the traditional design sense, but you know, can you imagine solutions to meet the needs that they have? And you're, you know, top of funnel, thinking of lots of things. The third piece is analytical skills to narrow down. Like once you know, everybody always has a ton of ideas at the top, but the question is, how do you decide which ones to actually build with the limited resources you have? And the fourth one is about relationship building. Like product managers generally lead through influence. And so you need to be able to work well with sales and engineering and every other function without managing them directly. And so I think if you take those 4 and add the adaptability, extra high adaptability quotient, you'd be in good shape.
Thank you. That's
I wanted to add one point because I think Jennifer had a really great list. I guess the one nuance I will add to in a crisis, because I think all those things are important all the time. In a crisis, I'd say one of the challenges is to balance speed to market and speed to adaptability. And so you don't have the time to do your full process, right? So customer empathy, you don't have time to do focus groups. And now granted, we did some surveys, we did try to get some insights, but you still have to act almost quicker than you have time to do a thorough product management process. And so it's almost like, how do you make that process lean under stress? And that's a skill and a judgment call and a gut and get feedback, but you got to do it quickly.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to wrap it up. As many of you guys are planning for your 2021 roadmap, this may feel like Herculean effort during the pandemic when things are